profit problems. So this one, questions 10 and 11. So do you think this is accurate? If they sold sweatshirts for $20, do you think 300 people would buy them? That's pretty good price. Okay? Now, if you make the price more expensive, less people will buy, right? There's a certain point when you go into a store and you go, no, I'm not going to buy that. If it was $5 cheaper, I would have, but at this price, no, that's my cutoff. But different people have different cutoffs. Some people are like, it doesn't matter the price. I want that. I will buy that. Okay? So what companies will do is they'll collect data. They'll collect data and find out, okay, if we do this, how many people are buying it? If we lower our price, how many more people will buy it? At what point should we set our price at to sell the most possible, to make the most money? Okay? So we're going to assume in this question, because it's going to ask for maximum profit, there's nothing in here that says how much the sweatshirts actually cost. So maybe the $20 is the profit. Maybe they've already figured that out. Or maybe they got them donated. So when they sell it for $20, they make $20 completely. So if we look at this, what we have to do is now create the equation. We want to find the maximum profit. So we start off by writing out in words, well, how do you figure out what the profit is? Right? Let's consider a specific example. The specific example is $20, they sell 300. What's their profit? How do you figure that out? $6,000. How did you figure that out? You multiplied them. You multiplied the, what word should we use for the 20? Cost or the price? The price times by, what do we times it by? What's the 300? The number sold. How many students? Is that how you get a profit? Right? How much one of them was? Maybe we should write that. Price of one times by the number sold. So here's the idea. Now we need to make algebra. And we need to decide what the price is and how many are sold. What is the price? Is it always 20? No, they can change it, right? By $5 increments. So what we can do is we could say, well, my profit's going to equal the price of one of them. It starts at $20, and then I can add or subtract $5 X amount of times. Because it's going up by $5. And the way that I like to think of this is, well, if we started with 20, then we sold 300. So if X is 0, then this would just be 20 times 300, what we had before. But what happens if X is 1? If we raise it $5, we have to minus 30. So one $5 increase will reduce this by 30. So what did we make our X? Now that we've made our equation, what is X? Well, if X is 1, then X represents the number of $5 increases. Does that make sense? If X is 2, I've had two $5 increases. If x is 3, I would have 3 $5 increases. And again, this is going to be the hard part, creating the equation. The profit questions will always have this pattern. They'll always have the two values that you start with. You know that when you have it at 20, you sell 300. Then your second thing is what your increments are and how it affects the number sold. So you put x in and you think of it as an idea of 1, what would that affect? Now these maximum profit questions, they have them for profits, they have them for, you'll get some questions sometimes where you're dealing with a field, like maybe an apple orchard, and you're planting apple trees. Now if you only plant one apple tree in a huge field, it's going to produce a lot of apples, but not as much as 2 apple trees would. Now eventually, you could plant apple trees 5 centimeters apart. They'd be so squished that none of them would produce any apples. And that wouldn't be a very good use of the space either. So you could figure out how many apple trees you should plant to get the maximum amount of apples out of that area. That would be similar to a profit question. So now that we've got our equation, can you see that this is a parabola? Okay. What would I have to do to get it into the general form? I'll have to FOIL it out. So let's do that. 20 times 300, there's my 6,000. Minus 600x plus 1,500x minus 150x squared. Combining my like terms and just rearranging it so that the x squared is first. We get some fairly large numbers. How do we complete the square? Factor out the a value out of the first two. And leave some spaces.
And these makes the numbers a bit easier as well.
Yeah, it is nicer to have a 6 there. What's going to be in the first green space? Plus 9. Excellent. What's going to be in the next green space? Plus 1350. That's a 1. To get the 9, we divide negative 6 by 2 and square. Yes. To get the 1350, we would say, well, that 9 gets hit by a minus 150. And 9 times minus 150 is negative 1350. So in order to make that go away, I'd have to add 1350.
So by doing this, we're basically just trying to get rid of like whatever's in the bracket there.
Yes. And now when we write this, x minus 3 squared plus 7350, we can say what our vertex is. 3, 7350. Well, this is our y value. Our y value in this case represented profit. And because it's our vertex, it's going to be a max or a min, but because the parabola is going down, it's going to be our max. We can make $7,350 if our x is 3. So does that mean we should sell the sweaters for $3?
Yeah.
What did x stand for? And this again is why it's really helpful, because you're doing a lot of math. By the time you finish the math, this happens to some people, they don't realize what they were doing anymore. Does that ever happen to you? You do so much math, you're like, okay, I got some numbers, I don't know what I was doing anymore. But I've got an answer. So maybe I should just quit and go on, right? That happens sometimes. But if you went back and you actually wrote out things What was X? X was the number of $5 increases. So we need to increase our price 3 times 5, $15. So what will our price be then? $35. And how many people will buy? Only 210. So we don't even have to make as many. If we decide to sell them for $35,
Good morning, Husky. If anybody still has any canned goods for the Project Echo Week 1 challenge, you can bring them
so
to Maryland Room in 2E8
the
right at the beginning of lunch.
question asked,
Great. Thank you very
what
much.
price will yield the maximum profit? $35. And what is the profit? So the price that will yield a maximum profit of $73.50 is $35. And at that price, 210 people will buy. So now you can see we could take this similar question. We could actually have how much we're selling it for and what's the cost. So then we could look at questions like that. And you could figure out what's going to make you the most money. My son was watching Food Truck Wars. Have you ever watched that on the Food Channel? So on the first day, the one truck was selling their main burger for $9 a burger, and the other truck was selling their main item for $5. So just based on the price, you can see that the $9 one doesn't even have to sell that many to still beat the other truck. On the next day, the other team figured out that their pricing needed to be in check, so they changed their price as well. But there again, if you charge too much, then people aren't going to buy. So you got to have that fine balance and try and figure out what the maximum.